Hello. Good morning. Welcome to Nathan's Christian Church this morning, where we are. This morning we're small in number but strong in spirit. We have various people who are at the mission trip and a couple other places, so we're going to pray for them later in the service. But we're glad you're here this morning. Glad you come to worship with us. So I invite you to stand with us as we sing and praise this morning. Praise thee, O God, for the Son of thy love, for Jesus who died and is now gone above. Hallelujah, thine the glory, hallelujah, amen. Hallelujah, thine the glory, revive us again. We praise thee, O God, for the Spirit of life, who has shown us our Savior and scattered our Hallelujah, thine the glory, hallelujah, amen. Hallelujah, thine the glory, revive us again. Revive us again, fill each heart with thy love. May each soul be rekindled with fire from above. Hallelujah, thine the glory, hallelujah, amen. Hallelujah, thine the glory, revive us again. Oh, what a wonderful, wonderful day, a day I will never forget. After I wandered in darkness away, Jesus my Savior I met. Oh, what a tender, compassionate friend, He met the need of my heart. Shadows dispelling with joy and telling, He made all the darkness depart. Heaven came down and glory filled my soul. When at the cross the Savior made me whole. My sins were washed away and my night was turned to day. Heaven came down and glory filled my soul. Now the hope that was surely endured after the passing of time, I have a future in heaven for sure, there in those mansions sublime. And it's because of that wonderful day, when at the cross I believe, riches eternal and blessings supernal from His precious hand I receive. Heaven came down and glory filled my soul. When at the cross the Savior made me whole. My sins were washed away and my night was turned to day. Heaven came down and glory filled my soul. These are the days of Elijah, declaring the word of the Lord. And these are the days of your servant Moses, righteousness being restored. And though these are days of great trials, of famine and darkness and sword, still we are the voice in the desert, crying, prepare ye the way of the Lord. Behold, He comes, riding on the clouds, shining like the sun. At the trumpet call, lift your voice, it's the year of Jubilee, and now the Zion's hill salvation comes. And these are the days of Ezekiel, the dry bones becoming as flesh. And these are the days of the servant David, building a temple of praise. And these are the days of the harvest, the fields are as white in the one, and we are your of Jubilee, and out of Zion's hill salvation comes. Strength will rise as we wait upon the Lord. We will wait upon the Lord. We will wait upon the Lord. Strength will rise as we wait upon the Lord. We will wait upon the Lord. We will wait upon the Lord. Our God, you reign forever. Our hope, our strong deliverer. You are the everlasting God, the everlasting God. You do not think you won't grow weary. You're the defender of the weak. You comfort those in need. You lift us up on wings like eagles. Strength
will rise and we wait upon the Lord. We will wait upon the Lord. We will wait upon the Lord.
Strength will rise as we wait upon the Lord. We will wait upon the Lord. We will wait upon the Lord. Our God, you reign forever. Our hope, our strong deliverer. You are the everlasting God, the everlasting God. You do not think you won't grow weary. You're the defender of the weak. You comfort those in need. You lift us up on wings like eagles. Maybe see. How lovely is your dwelling place, O Lord Almighty. All my soul longs and even faints for you. For here my heart is satisfied within your presence. I see the shadow of your wings. Better is one day in your heart, better is one day in your house, better is one day in your court, thousands elsewhere. Better is one day in your heart, better is one day in your house, better is one day in your court, thousands elsewhere. Thousands elsewhere. One thing I ask, and I would seek to see your beauty, to find you in the place your glory dwells. One thing I ask, and I would seek to see your beauty, to find you in the place your glory dwells. Better is one day in your courts, better is one day in your house, better is one day in your courts, thousands elsewhere. Better is one day in your courts, better is one day in your house, cry out for you, the living God. Your Spirit's water to my soul. I've tasted and I've seen. Come once again to me. I will draw near to you. I will draw near to you. Better is one day in your courts. Better is one day in your house. Better is one day in your courts. Thousands I swear. Better is one day in your courts. Better is one day in your house. Better is one day in your courts. Thousands I swear. Thousands I swear. More love, more power, more of you in my life. More love, more power, more of you in my life. And I will worship you with all of my heart. And I will worship you with all of my mind. And I will worship you with all of my strength. For you are my Lord. More love, more power, more of you in my life. More love, more power, more of you in my life. And I will seek your face with all of my heart. And I will seek your face with all of my mind. And I will seek your face with all of my strength. For you are my Lord. And I want more.
Things change, plans fail. You look for love on a grander scale. Storms rise, hopes fade, and you place your bets on another day. When the going gets tough, when the ride's too rough, when you're just not sure enough, Jesus will still be there. His love will never change, sure as a steady rain. Jesus will still be there. When no one else is true, he'll still be loving you. When it looks like you've lost it all and you haven't got a prayer, Jesus will still be there. Time flies, hearts turn a little bit wiser from lessons learned. Sometimes weakness wins and you lose your foothold once again. When the going gets tough, when the ride's too rough, when you're just not sure enough, Jesus will you've lost it all and you haven't got a prayer, Jesus will still be there. Jesus will still be there. His love will never change. Sure as a steady rain, Jesus will still be there. When no one else is true, He'll still be loving you. When it looks like you've lost it all and you haven't got a prayer, Jesus will still be there. When it looks like you've lost it all and you haven't got a prayer, Jesus will still be there.
That someone loves you, I'm sorry to tell you, but you may be getting duped. I'm sure you've heard the phrase, talk is cheap, or put your money where your mouth is. And when it comes to love, these statements could not be more true. When we relegate love to just a feeling or just to words, it loses its power, its effectiveness, in fact, its very purpose. Because love cannot be contained by feelings, but must be demonstrated through action. How do we know when someone loves us? We know by what they do for us and how they treat us. Married people, if you tell your spouse that you love them, but you don't help out around the house to relieve them of some of the burden of life, that's not love. Parents, if you tell your kids you love them, but you don't spend time with them and don't provide for them and don't train them up in what is right, that's not love. Young people, if you tell your parents you love them, but you don't obey them and don't give them respect, that's not love. If you tell your friends you love them, but you never check on them and never call to see how things are going, never do something nice for them, that's not love. That's as worthless as ending a text with a heart emoji. John the Apostle was well acquainted with this sentiment of relegating love to a feeling with no action behind it. As he wrote his letters, he had to counteract a group that was tearing the church apart with a theology called Gnosticism. Basically, Gnostics thought they possessed a superior knowledge of God. So they drew a line between what was spiritual, which they considered good, and the material, which they considered to be bad. So all they cared about was the spiritual life. They thought nothing the body could do could tarnish or affect the spiritual. And so all the commandments are thrown out the window, unnecessary baggage. So for example, they could go around beating people up, maybe even murdering them, but that would not affect their spirituality. They could cheat on their spouses, But that wasn't a big deal because their spirit was still right. You can talk about selfish, right? So they could say they were living in God's love without actually doing anything, without following up that sentiment with action. And it seems so wrong, doesn't it? And yet I see the same sort of ideology creep into our society and even into our churches. The idea that as long as I think I'm right with God, I can do whatever I want, as long as it's not too bad. The idea that the commands and the expectations for how we should live as Christians are situational or optional. So some think that as long as they go to church, they're baptized, they take the Lord's Supper, that they're good with God. They justify having a bad attitude, being unkind, or acting cruelly with their spiritual status. Now, we may not be Gnostics, but we sure do conveniently pick and choose when and how we apply Jesus' teachings. And so John's writings are as applicable today as they were to his original audience. And what he has to say is indicting and it's tough to swallow, but it's so vital if we really want to impact our world. And what he has to say is simply this: love one another. I heard a story about a church, and they just hired a new preacher. And they were very excited because they heard this man could really, really preach. He was one of the up-and-coming preachers. And so the very first Sunday, with all the expectation in the world on him, the preacher got up, and he said 3 words: love one another. And he sat down. Now, they were a little taken aback by this, but they figured, well, he's building up to something. And so they came back the next week, and they all returned, and they wanted to hear what he had to say. And the preacher once again stood up, and he said, love one another. And he sat down. In fact, the preacher did it again a 3rd week. And by this point, the leadership was getting a little nervous, thinking they had made a terrible mistake. And so they called a meeting, and they told the preacher that he needed to start preaching more, or his job would be in danger. And the minister simply replied, when this church has mastered this sermon, we'll move on to something else. Love one another. It's a simple message. We sing about it in our hymns and choruses. We tell our children to do it. But I don't think we've mastered it, have we? And so John's letters focus on this theme almost exclusively. He spells out as clearly as he can in 2 John verses 5 and 6. And now, dear lady, I'm not writing to you a new command, but one that we have had from the beginning. I ask that we love one another. And this is love, that we walk in obedience to his commands. As you've heard from the beginning, his command is that you walk in love. Dear lady is his term of affection for the church that he's writing to. And he says that he's not writing anything new. It's a command as old as time: love one another. Jesus says that all the commands could be summed up with love God and love others. There's this great Jewish story that says the same thing. Once a heathen came to Hillel. He was a leading Jewish rabbi. And this heathen said to him, I'll convert to Judaism if you can teach me the whole Torah while I stand on one foot. Now, Torah, it means law. And usually refers to the first 5 books of the Bible. So basically, he's asking Hillel to sum up the entire law, 613 commands, in a short amount of time. And so Hillel looked at him and he said, what you dislike, do not do to others. That is the whole Torah. The rest is commentary. Go and learn the commentary. It's just a negative reformulation of love your neighbor as yourself. If you don't like something, then don't do it to someone else. And like John and Jesus, Hillel understands that love is the guiding principle for life. But John refuses to let us off the hook by relegating love to just a feeling. First he says we need to love each other, but in case there's any confusion about what love actually is, he follows it up by defining love. That we walk in obedience to the commands. Love is obedience. Take a second and let that sink in. Love is obedience. In a world where people fall in and out of love, where we measure love by affection, John says that emotion is not as important as submission. This very sentiment is conveyed in wedding vows. We say things like, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, till death do us part. Robertson McQuilkin was the president of Columbia Bible College and Seminary. It's now Columbia International University. In 1990, he stepped down from the presidency to care for full-time for his ailing wife, Muriel. She was struggling with Alzheimer's disease. I just want to show you a clip from his resignation speech.
I haven't in my life experienced easy decision-making on major decisions, But one of the simplest and clearest decisions I've had to make is this one, because circumstances dictated it. Muriel, now, in the last couple of months, seems to be almost happy when with me, and almost never happy when not with me. In fact, she seems to feel trapped, becomes very fearful, sometimes almost terror. And when she can't get to me, there can be anger. She's in distress. But when I'm with her, she's happy and contented. And so I must be with her at all times. And you see, it's not only that I promised in sickness and in health, till death do us part. And I'm a man of my word. But as I have said, I don't know with this group, but I have said publicly, it's the only fair thing. She sacrificed for me for 40 years to make my life possible. So, if I cared for her for 40 years, I'd still be in debt. However, there's much more. It's not that I have to, it's that I get to. I love her very dearly, and you can tell it's not easy to talk about. She's a delight. It's a great honor to care for such a wonderful person.
See, that's what divine love looks like. A man giving up his own life for someone else. John puts it this way. Dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love. This is how God showed his love among us. He sent his one and only Son into the world that we might live through him. This is love, not that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son as an atoning sacrifice for our sins. Dear friends, since God so loved us, we also ought to love one another. No one has ever seen God, but if we love one another, God lives in us, and his love is made complete in us. See, John's not afraid to separate people out. There's one simple test to tell whether you are a Christian, to tell if you've been born again of God. Do you love? Because if you don't love, John says, you don't really love God. And again, to avoid any possibility of watering down what love is, John makes it clear what godly love is. It is sacrifice. God loved by sacrifice. Jesus gave his life to save us. He sacrificed what he wanted for us. Period. You know, so often I think we get this view that Jesus was like a robot who always made the right decision with no problems, like he's programmed to do it. But Jesus struggled too. In the Garden of Gethsemane, he asked God if there was another way, any other way, than him being beaten and crucified. Any other way than this amazing sacrifice. But there was not. Because love does not cut corners. And what separates Jesus from us is that he chose love and he chose sacrifice each and every time. And while this seems impossible for us, it seems like it is beyond us, we need to remember that we are not walking this path of love alone. Jesus has already walked it. He's already shown what it looks like, not just in his death, but in his life. How he treated people, how he cared for people, how he accepted and forgave people. And now he turns to us and he says, follow me down the path of love. John repeats this exact same sentiment in 1 John 3:16 through 18. This is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. If anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need, but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? Dear children, let us love not with words or speech, but with actions and in truth. Jesus loved through sacrificial obedience. God called him to lay down his life. And now God calls us to follow Jesus' example and do the exact same thing. We love not with words, not with bringing ourselves selfish pleasure, but in actions and in truth. In other words, true love is seen in how we treat those we encounter and how closely we live out the truth. Again, we need to reevaluate how we approach and live out love. Love is not just flowers and candy and cards. Love is couched in truth. as we reject sin and we live holy lives, that is love. And it makes sense. We love best when we sin less. Every sin I commit holds me back from being loving to someone else. In fact, John uses his third letter to call someone out for specifically this. John writes to Gaius, who was a man who lived in truth. He was doing everything he could to help his fellow Christians, including caring for traveling preachers. But his sacrifice is contrasted with another local leader, Diotrephes. And this is what he says in verses 9 through 11 of 3 John. I wrote to the church, but Diotrephes, who loves to be first, will not welcome us. So when I come, I will call attention to what he's doing, spreading malicious nonsense about us. Not satisfied with that, he even refuses to welcome other believers. He also stops those who want to do so, puts them out of the church. Dear friend, do not imitate what is evil, but what is good. Anyone who does what is good is from God, and anyone who does what is evil has not seen God. You see, Diotrephes is damaging John's character. He's keeping John and his letters from reaching the people. He's spreading lies. He's hindering missionary outreach. In other words, he is being selfish because he loved his place of prominence. And this sort of lifestyle is directly opposed to the gospel message, to John's message. And John's advice, don't imitate that sort of evil. Imitate what is good. Imitate Jesus. So if you have any authority over someone, children and employees, whomever, use that as an opportunity to love and not control. If you have skills and abilities, use them as an opportunity to love. I want to show you a quick clip about the story of Dr. Tom Catena. He did just that. He is using what he has to love.
This is the hospital where Tom Catena has worked since 2008 as the only doctor. The 400-bed Mother of Mercy Hospital is in the remote Nuba Mountains of Sudan, where decades of civil war has laid waste to much of the landscape and killed and maimed tens of thousands of people.
The second bomb was dropped right here. I stay right here, which is maybe 20, 30 meters away, 25 meters away. You can see my room right here. I blasted in my doors and windows. The roofs are all buckled just from the concussive force of the bomb. So you imagine if you're anywhere in this area, it would have been blown to bits.
There is a singular and powerful reason that Tom Catena has chosen this life.
I'm only here because of my Christian faith. I don't think if I didn't have that, I don't think I would be able to do this work. I take the ideas in the Bible and the teachings of Christ very, very seriously. We're all somehow related as children of God.
Who probably could have charged what he wanted at his own practice. And yet he chose to love strangers halfway around the world. Why? Well, according to him, because of his faith. Because he took the words of Jesus seriously. Now, if you're like me, you think, well, I'm not a medical doctor. I can't go somewhere around the world and help the less fortunate. Or I don't have a bunch of money. I can't feed all the homeless. And that may be true. But you don't have to travel halfway across the world to love. You are uniquely situated to extend your love in your own sphere of influence. I read this week a story of a woman who's at an Enterprise rental place because her car had been disabled due to a hit-and-run accident. And so she has two 11-month-olds, twins, 11-month-old babies, but she only had a single stroller. And so she's trying to fill out the paperwork and dealing with one baby in a stroller and got another baby in her arm, and she had to hold it. And so the Enterprise worker took one of the babies to help this woman. It's a simple act of love, having nothing to do with his job, nothing to do with being super talented or amazingly wealthy. He just saw a need, and he met it. See, that's the love. That's the way of Jesus. And we need to seek out ways to walk down this path as well. challenge for us is very clear. Love sacrificially. Love the people whose ideology you hate. Love the stranger and the foreigner. Love the immigrant and the refugee. Love your enemy and your persecutor. Love your neighbor as yourself. Not with words and speech, not with just prayers and thoughts, but with actions and in truth. By doing for them, by giving them exactly what they need, whether it's a meal, a home to stay in, a shoulder to cry on, an ear to listen, or a long-term investment of your presence and your resources. And when you do, you accomplish something amazing. You flip the script. You contribute to changing someone. I was listening to an NPR podcast this week. It's called Invisibilia, that discusses all the nonverbal ways people interact and communicate. And they mentioned that generally speaking, people will mirror one another. I mean, have you ever noticed that it's easy to be nice to nice people? Have you also noticed that antagonistic people bring out the worst in you? It's because we mirror each other. If someone is hostile to you, it is natural to be hostile back. If someone is warm and kind to you, it's easy to be warm and kind back. See, that's complementary behavior. But there's this amazing thing called non-complementary behavior. In other words, instead of mirroring, we break the pattern and we do the opposite. Now, this is an incredibly hard thing to do because who wants to do something kind to someone who's treating you poorly? It goes against the very fiber of our beings. But if you can maintain warmth and civility and love, you can flip the script and change the person. This is a story from that podcast. Listen to this story that's ripped straight from real life.
This story starts in Washington, D.C. on a warm summer night. There were 8 friends gathered around a backyard dinner table. They were toasting family and friendship, and everybody was having a good time.
Kind of one of those great evenings. Lots of awesome food and French wine, and it was like a magical night.
That's Michael Rabdo. He was there with his wife and his 14-year-old daughter, Kyber. And he says it was getting late, maybe around 10 p.m., when it happened.
I was standing beside my wife, and I just saw this arm with a long-barrel gun come between us. It was as if in slow motion, this hand, and then it just got really quiet.
The hand belonged to a man, medium height, in clean, high-end sweats. He raised the gun and held it first to the head of Michael's friend, Christina, and then to the head of Michael's wife.
Then he said,
"Give me your money."
That's Kyber, Michael's daughter.
Kept repeating, "Give me your money."
"Oh, I'm going to start shooting." And we believed him.
But there was a problem. No one had any money. So they started talking, grasping for some way to dissuade the man. They started with guilt.
What would your mother...
What would your mother think of you?
And he said something like, "I don't have a mother."
Michael remembers thinking, this is headed towards a very bad end.
Someone was going to get hurt.
But then one of the women at the table, this woman, Christina, pipes up. She has an offer for the man.
Said, "We're here celebrating. Why don't you have a glass of wine?"
It was like a switch. He could feel the difference.
All of a sudden, Michael says, the look on the man's face changed.
And he tasted the wine and just said, "That's a really good glass of wine." We had some cheese there too. And so he reached down for the cheese, and then he put the gun in his pocket.
The man drank his wine, ate his cheese, and then he said something that no one expected.
"I think I've come to the wrong place." And we were all like, "Hey, I understand."
For a moment, they all sat there together. The stars overhead twinkling, the sound of chirping insects in the night air.
And then he said something just so strange. He just said, "Can I get a hug?" My wife hugged him, and our friend hugged him. Then he said, "Can we have a group hug?"
And so everyone got up, and formed a circle around the man.
I can't tell you how strange that was, but we all did come around him and hug him, and he said he was sorry, and he walked out with a glass of wine out the gate.
At the time, all they could think to do was run into the house and cry in gratitude.
It was like, this was like a miracle. It was like a miracle.
Anthropologists call that non-complimentary behavior. I call that taking Jesus' command to love our enemies seriously. While scientists might dismiss that sort of action as not miraculous, the reality is that true love is divine, because it goes completely against our selfish natures. Because true love is not about pleasure, it's about sacrificial obedience. It's about doing the right thing every time, regardless of the cost. It is about reflecting the very essence and character of God. And that is something we desperately need to share with this world. Dear friends, since God so loved us, we also ought to love one another. No one has ever seen God, but if we love one another, God lives in us, and His love is made complete in us. Let's stand and sing together this morning.
Think about His love. Think about His goodness. Think about His grace that's brought us through. For as high as the heavens above, so great is the measure of our Father's love. Great is the measure of our Father's love. Think about His love. Think about His goodness. Think about His grace that's brought us through. For as high as the heavens above, so great is the measure of our Father's love. Great is the measure of our Father's love. Maybe seated. How He loves you and me. Oh, how He loves you and me. He gave His life, what more could He give? Oh, how He loves you. Oh, how He loves me. Oh, how He loves you and Jesus to Calvary did go, His love for sinners to show. What He did there brought hope from despair. Oh, how He loves you. Oh, how He loves me. Oh, how He loves you and me.
Glad you joined us in worship this morning. If you have any prayer requests or ministry need, please fill out a card and put it in the plate as passed. A couple quick announcements before we go. As I mentioned, the mission team is already out and probably in Campton by now, so please be in prayer for them. If you wake up in the morning, say a quick prayer. As you sit in your air conditioning, say a prayer for them. It won't be. And I know some of you are going up later this week, and so we look forward to having you as well. As a result, there are no activities this evening. But next Sunday, we're going to have a lesson for the adults and kids and youth. And then August 7th will be the pool party. So we look forward to that. Are there any other announcements I'm failing to mention? All right. Let's stand for have a closing word of prayer. God, it is entirely because of your love and your grace that we are here, that we are able to gather with one another. And we just thank you and praise you for that, God. We thank you for these opportunities and these blessings, and I pray that we not take them for granted. I pray that we take that what you have given us and how you've created us, and we use it for your glory. Give us opportunities to love the least of these, to love those who we encounter. Give us a heart for people, for loving them sacrificially. God, may we never forget how you loved us, who gave up your home in heaven to come down to earth to be beaten and killed for us. May it motivate us and encourage us and show us the way to walk, the path of love. Through Christ we pray all these things. Amen. You're dismissed.